you know.
We're trying a little different microphone system today, Fred, because people have been complaining about the sound.
The sound, right.
And matter of fact, I just ran out to my car to get some stuff out of my briefcase, so it was almost to where you were going to have to introduce the program today, but we are coming to you live again from beautiful downtown Eau Claire L.E. Phillips Library, right here in the heart of downtown Eau Claire, Fred, the jewel of the North. Now, I see you're adjusting a t-shirt there so that you can get some kind of a commercial message out. All right, well, non-commercial message. They're a non-profit organization. Memorial Post, what's the post number?
2115.
2115 with the POW MIAs.
Right.
Kind of a forgotten group, Fred. Man, that's a fancy t-shirt. It's kind of a forgotten group, the POW
Right.
MIAs. Now that there's normalized relations.
We seem to have sold them out.
Well, you know, I just wanted to introduce everybody now that this is Fred
Stafford.
Fred K. Stafford.
No, it's no K. It's Fred F.
Past commander of American Legion Post 53.
Past state commander of the Catholic War Veterans, too.
Uh-huh. And many other things that you've been accused
Yes.
of over the years. That might or might not be true. Well, Fred, we've got a lot to talk about today, and you know, we'd like to tell people what happened on this day in history over the years. And today is April 18th, 1994. And what happened on this day that you can think of, Fred? Off the top of your head.
I can't think of anything.
Nothing? How about 1942? That brings back memories.
April 18th,
April 18th.
1942. Is that when the Japs shelled the West Coast or
No? Well,
invaded part of Alaska?
Fred, no. I know you don't hold anything against Japanese.
No.
The Japs are a slang term, and you know one of our state senators got in big trouble over those slang terms. War terms is what they're, you know.
Well,
So anyways, Japanese.
yes.
So 1942, Fred, after a courageous and dangerous launching from an aircraft carrier, Major General Jimmy
Doolittle
leads
bomb.
the first bombing raid against
Japan.
Tokyo, Japan in World War II. The successful raid is a major morale boost to the American public. And I'm sure it was, Fred, after Pearl Harbor. What did the American people think about that after the disgrace of Pearl Harbor and almost destroying their fleet?
I think those that were in charge of our affairs at that time, the President, the Secretary of Defense, etc., should have been brought to trial for allowing Pearl Harbor to happen. They knew the attack was coming. They broke the code.
But you know, there has been some rumors, Fred, that Roosevelt knew ahead of time
Sure.
that it was coming.
They were having a meeting at the time of the attack, a cabinet meeting. Mr. Roosevelt got what he wanted. He involved us in the war.
He did.
Sure. People don't know it, but we were out in our destroyers and whatnot, patrolling the seas and bombing German submarines prior to that.
Now, you personally were involved in the Battle of New York Harbor, weren't you?
Well, if you want to call it such.
Well, you know, I thought you were joking about that. The other day I saw a documentary on U-boats off of the eastern seaboard there. And one of the German commanders of the U-boats admitted that they were sinking merchant marine and other shipping that was on its way over to Europe to stop it, to keep it out of the war, keep those supplies
Right.
out. And they were doing it right off the New York coast. And I don't know if the authorities knew that it was just, they thought that it was just a ship sinking by natural causes, or...
I was on a PF, the PF-24, which was a patrol frigate, and we went out with a convoy, and we did spot a submarine. Now, our patrol frigate was not called upon to go after that submarine. Destroyer escort went after them, which was much faster than we were, and I believe they got the submarine.
Fred, were you in the military all through the World War II then?
Sure. I went in October 21st, 41, come out January 8th, 46.
Now, they had a thing called rationing back then.
Yes.
It was a patriotic effort to make sure that various strategic minerals and metals and rubber and all that stuff was available for the war effort. What was it like to live under that rationing?
Well, we managed. You know, the Coast Guard, and I was in the Coast Guard, we lived on 38 cents a day. That's what we were allowed for rations, for food.
What could 38 cents buy?
Well, 38 cents could buy just I guess you could get a pound of butter, maybe a pound of frankfurters, and a dozen eggs at that time.
All of that for 30?
Well, no, just one of them.
So if one day you wanted to eat a pound of butter, that was it, huh?
Well, you had to have other things too.
I'm sure there was a lot of potatoes and flour and the basics, rice and stuff.
Potatoes and well.
Of course, maybe rice wasn't that popular.
Wasn't that popular as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
We didn't have it too often, but we did have it once in a while.
So.
But we had bologna and some of the other cold cuts quite regularly.
So do you think
frankfurters?
Did you see anyone starving or begging in the streets? Or?
No. And ironically,
you were right in New York City.
If you had money, you could go out and buy ration stamps and go and get what you wanted. When my mother died in '42, and I went to home, and I got a leave, and I went to the ration board to get some stamps. So they gave me a couple of stamps, which would be good for about a pound or two of meat, and a pound of butter, and a couple of pounds of sugar. That's all I could get. And 5 gallons of gasoline. Stamp for 5 gallons of gasoline.
Now, when did they quit making cars during the war? They stopped?
They stopped in '42.
So from '42 to '45, there was no new production of cars. Everything was shifted to the war effort.
Right.
So like Chrysler shifted from cars to tanks, wasn't that the...
True.
I think there was a large tank factory up in East Chicago, Indiana that used to be a Chrysler plant that produced tanks during the war. I've been in that plant, Fred. At the time, it was one of the biggest plants in the world, man. It's a big plant. It takes a while to walk from one end to the other.
I was out after the war, I guess in the '50s. We went past the Willow Run plant that Ford had. Oh, the great big plant.
Okay, now, so you didn't have any vehicles. Now, I helped a friend of mine dig up some tires in his backyard because of Earth Day and recycling and everything. He had tires buried in there from the '30s and '40s. And I guess people hoarded tires because they didn't know how long the war was going to last.
True.
And a good tire was a good barter item. I mean, you might be able to trade a good tire for a few gallons of gas or some other. Now, was there an underground economy with the...
I'm not aware of that, but I will tell you this. When I went down to get some meat, and I don't know if I ever mentioned that on this program, and I had those stamps, and I went down, and I was on a weekend, on a Saturday, I guess it was, or a Friday. I went down to the so-called supermarket, and I went to look and see what they had for meat. They had some frankfurters, they had some bologna, and they had some sausage. That's all they had. I says, I wanted to get a steak or something. I says, I haven't had a steak since I went into service. And they told me, well, come in Tuesday. The truck will be here at 10 o'clock in the morning. That's when we get our meat. Well, I came into town around 8 o'clock in the morning, and I rode past the supermarket, and I didn't think anything of it, but I saw a line there of women. I went down and saw some of my friends. Then I came back around 10 o'clock, and I went to go into the store, and they said, you going in for groceries? Going in for meat? Yes, I'm going to get some meat. Get on the back of the line. When I got back into the store, all the whatever they had was gone except what I saw before, some bologna, frankfurters, and a few different kinds of cold cuts. That's all I had.
You know, Fred, that harkens to another era. You know, the like in the Soviet Union, they've been under that rationing system for 75 years. And you can go into major stores now, I guess because of the free enterprise system. There are stores now that are starting to flourish, and goods are more available if you've got the dough.
Yeah.
But when you only had that rationing coupon, you went into a store and there might be one bone left for ham soup there, and 20 people want it. You know, that's not a socialist utopia.
You know what happened now? After that happened to me, and I was there on the Tuesday, I went up to see the butcher that we used to buy meat from before. And he was up in East Northport. We lived in the suburbs of Northport. And I went in to see him, and he didn't have much more than the other place did downtown in Northport. So I said, gee, where can I get a steak or some lamb chops or something to eat? This is what I get in the service day after day.
You get steak in the service or
no
bologna?
So I went and he says to me, go to see the butcher across the tracks, and you can tell him I sent you, and if he wants to call me up, I'll tell him you're okay. Well, I went to the butcher, and I'm in uniform, and he says to me, who are you? And I told him my name. He looked it up in the telephone book. He says, what's your telephone number? I told him the telephone number. And he says, you got anybody that can vouch for you? Well, I said, the other butcher, I said, sent me down to see you. He called him up. And then he says to me, what do you want? I says, I'd like a nice T-bone steak. I'd like a pound or two of lamb chops and a slice of ham. He says, I'll have it for you in an hour. Come back in an hour. An hour, I came back later. No ration stamps. I got what I wanted. I paid a few cents more than you would have paid if you got it with the ration stamps.
Well, you remember the early 70s when the Nixon administration put their rationing on because of the gas crisis, and we had just a real big mess on our hands there. A lot of people were getting nervous about stamps, and the stamps were even printed up for rationing, I guess. Yes. They're still sitting in a warehouse somewhere. But Fred, while you were discussing World War II, we had somebody slip into the studio here, a busy man today, and I want to introduce the audience to Wayne Laufenberg. And Wayne, I see in today's Lear Telegram, and also I do have a copy of your press release, that you today have formally announced your plans to run for the 68th Assembly District, which encompasses the northern half of Eau Claire. Is that true?
That's absolutely true. You're right. Okay.
So you're kind of going on a whirlwind tour today of the district, or?
True. We started out at the announcement at the courthouse, then we went up to Stanley and met some people up there and talked to the people at the Stanley Republican, and which is the newspaper. They're not all Republicans, that's just the name of the paper. And then we stopped over at the Cadet Sentinel. We stopped at Boyd and met some people over there. We were over at Halley visiting the people of Halley. So I've had quite a tour so far. Been a busy day.
And what was your reception this morning with your announcement?
Well, I think it was very positive, and we had a large crowd there that showed up for the announcement, and then the media turned out en masse. Well, we were really pleased about that.
Now, anyone that's running for office, they give a press release, but they tell the viewers exactly what they stand for and what they want to do if they're elected, because this is we live in a democracy, and it's run by majority rules, and in some cases that majority can be 50% plus one. So it's important that the viewers and people get to know exactly what a candidate stands for and where he's at on the issues. So I'm going to just give you I'll hold the mic, and you can just kind of give the viewers your plans if you are elected to the 68th Assembly District.
Sure. I just want to point out that majority sometimes is 50% minus 171 votes, because that's how close we came to. It was really narrow, just by a whisker. We almost won last time out of 8,000 votes. And we were outspent by $30,000, which is which is a lot of money, which they were running ads back to back on the commercial television. So they outspent us a great deal. And so we spent our time getting good name recognition, and I think now that that's just one campaign in the battle, and we're continuing the war, and we plan to win the war. I think 1994 is going to be our year. Okay? We have a number of good candidates running for office this time. Governor Tommy Thompson will be running, Senator Dave Zine, who's absolutely tireless, hardworking. We have the very effective Rob Krybick. All of us will be running side by side. So I think it's going to be a big year for us, and I think we're going to have a big victory in November.
Excuse me, isn't it a little easier to run? I mean, these special elections, it's like the whole world is watching. You know, you're under a microscope. Is it a little easier to run when you get other people running for other offices too?
Oh, yes, and, because there's a momentum, and it turns out more voters. And sometimes the voters that are attracted by certain candidates will spill over onto your side. So to that extent, sometimes it's called a bandwagon effect. And sometimes that occurs. And then, of course, you get a lot more voters out and a lot more interest, and it's a lot more excitement. It's a lot of fun. But in terms of our program, which I want to get into, I really believe that people are tired of politics as usual. Okay? And I'm calling for a new vision. And this new vision that we're not afraid to dream new dreams, and as we prepare for the 21st century. We need strong, fearless representatives who have good ideas, and they're not afraid to lead. Sometimes representatives show up in Madison, they're captive of special interests, and they are afraid to lead. I'm telling you, they're afraid to lead. So you have one here who is not afraid, that we're going to be strong and independent. This new vision consists of several things. First of all, we'll continue our program of letting the people decide. You remember the strong fight I put up for the referendum for the Highway 53 bypass, so the people could decide. Let the people. We're going to continue that, and we're going to add those components of the legislative initiative and the constitutional initiative and the 12-year term limits. With those two initiatives, then the people themselves, you see, can actually vote on legislation and bring it into fruition. We'll really be letting the people decide. Also, we have a much better idea for property tax relief. It's called RAPS, and we'll be unfolding this and providing more information about the RAPS program. It's for property tax relief, and it'll be Reinventing Government, which is a very exciting program. We'll probably be releasing this program nationally because it has an impact on national, state, and local government at every level. As you know, my training is in public administration. I'm what you would call a public administration scientist, and I've worked in government, I've headed up state agencies and so forth, and I think this is really an exciting program that's going to be very popular. It's going to really have a whole new look at government. Okay, we want to take a look at women's issues. There's a lot of young women now and young mothers that are required to work, and they're away from their families, and of course they miss these little children. So we're recommending such things as flex time, you know, to allow them maybe to go to work a little later, but work a little later again in the evening. So maybe they have to get the kids off to school. Also, share time, in which two women, for example, could each split a job, one working half a day and the other working the other half a day, so they could spend more time with their children. Also, women's issues of on-site daycare. I think whenever possible, we should try to get on-site daycare for those people who have to work outside the home, so that they can check in on their children and check in on their children's safety. Many daycare centers are very good, but you know, we hear the horror stories once in a while. People feel better, and the children feel better if the daycare's there. We're also going to be going after those gun-toting criminals. These are the people that commit crimes with guns. We've really got to nail these people to the wall, you know, with tough laws. We need to protect the innocent. We need to be very careful so that the innocent people who are innocently drawn into the judicial system, you and I, for example, so they don't throw us in jail or anyone else in jail, right, unfairly. So we need to protect people's civil rights. But on the other hand, we're going after those people that are just molesting people and terrorizing them with guns. Got to do that. Also, I think our senior citizens are our grandparents. We want to keep our grandparents in the homes, in their own homes as long as possible. And we do have homebound programs. We need to increase those as they're actually cheaper. These homebound that would help them stay at home with services and things than actually sending them to nursing homes. And of course, we want to emphasize property tax relief so they can afford to stay in their homes. Another aspect of this new vision is farmers. Nobody's talking about the new emphasis on regulations that are being foisted on the backs of our farmers. A lot of these in a variety of areas. They've been talking about a new piece of legislation now, which would be like a environmental warden that would come out on the farm, just like a game warden, and could write you a ticket on the spot. And this could be for fines of up to $100 a day, up to $2,000 a day. You imagine our poor farmers if someone is following them around the barn and writing tickets for any abuse. They're just going too far. We've got to give our farmers a break because we can compete. American farmers are terrific. They can compete in this new world market, if we give them a level playing field. Okay, now, that's what we need to do. And the other thing that's very important in this new vision is good jobs for a living wage. We need to work hard to bring good jobs to the Chippewa Valley, to Eau Claire and Chippewa County. And they have to be the kind of jobs that are good wages. And of course, I'm going to fight for that. I've headed up the rural community development program for an entire state. I've had experience in this area. I'm going to bring that to bear. I'm very interested in bringing good jobs and working with the people we have that are working on that. Make it more effective. It seems like Menominee and Dunn County is getting all the jobs. And sure, there are neighbors, and we like to support them. But by golly, we want some jobs in Eau Claire and Chippewa. And I'm just going to be right after that. Also, tourism. I was talking about as Highway 29 is completed, tourism is going to grow. It's going to bring more jobs to this area. And I want to take a very active part in promoting tourism. So that kind of explains the new vision. And I think that'll be a new idea and a new dream for this area, and we'll work very hard to carry that out.
I was taking a few notes here while you were speaking, and getting back to the one on mandates. Now, right now, the way our state's set up, you kind of rely on your representative or senator to get things pushed through to where the governor signs it into law. But there is no binding ballot process where, say, Fred and I can go out and get 10,000 signatures, get something on the ballot, and then it's approved and made into law right on the spot if it's approved by the ballot process. This state doesn't have that. A lot of states do. It seems to be a democratic thing. If you can't redress your grievances with the government, you go out and you get ballots and you knock on doors and you say, will you sign this petition? We want to change the law on this, and right now we can't. So you're calling for a different approach to where people can do that?
Yes, and it isn't entirely different. We have that experience in Wisconsin. It can be done at the city level, not the county level, but at the city level. So we have that opportunity. Now I just want to expand that to the state, and many states in the United States have that. That is based on the progressive movement of a great old Republican governor at the turn of the century named Bob La Follette, as part of these reforms of government and eliminating corruption from government. We need to go that extra step now. It's time for Wisconsin to have constitutional initiative so the people can change their constitution, and legislative initiative so they can actually write state laws. When you get the politicians that are stagnating and all tied up in gridlock and knots in Madison.
Okay, I don't want to hog the questioning here, Fred. Maybe you have a question for Mr. Laufenberg?
How about the outer bypass?
No, that's a good question. As you know, that I have consistently pushed for the referendum so that the people let the people decide, okay? It seems to me from the information that I've been able to glean from talking to various governmental leaders that the outer bypass is more popular and more accepted by the people. And local newspaper in Eau Claire did a survey, suggested that, and most of the outlying communities support that. So in the interest of the people, I would have to support the outer bypass, although I would prefer a referendum to let the people decide. But if they can decide, the whole purpose is to get a decision, right, in July when the Transportation Projects Commissions meet. That's what it's all about, right? So that we can get the dangerous traffic, the life-threatening traffic off Highway 53 and gradually pull that out to one of the two corridors. So I guess I would support the outer bypass, although I would prefer a referendum.
Now, I think because of your efforts, though, you did at least get the Leader-Telegram to run a survey, and that, in a sense, was a type of referendum. It's not as binding or legal as an official ballot, but at least it gave us a sense of where the community was at, and the majority said they want an outer.
Well, if they go ahead and build an inner corridor, would you support stopping the discrimination against Chippewa Falls, Bloomer, Chetek, Rice Lake, and have them build an inner corridor there for them too?
In what way would you say they're being discriminated?
Well, they don't have an inner corridor. They never had an opportunity, and of course, and I say this, I don't own any property in those areas, and I'm just asking, would you work to eliminate that discrimination so that they would have an inner corridor?
Well, I don't really feel it's discrimination, Fred, but the Chippewa, has sort of an inner corridor. They have a highway that goes right through downtown Chippewa, just to bypass the main drag by one street. And I suppose that is very helpful in promoting business downtown Chippewa. So they don't need another inner bypass.
That's for the people who want to bypass downtown.
Well, Hastings Way is an inner bypass right now. I mean, people fly by at 65 and 70 if they don't get caught by the police. So there are stretches there where you can really push it. Now, a lot of people, most quarters say, hey, we got to do something about this 53. It's getting congested. It needs improvements. There is some work done, but I feel we don't need the state abandoning 53 and making it a city street. And basically that would be an unfunded mandate where you dump that back on the city, and then they have to foot the bill for repairs and everything. It should remain some kind of state highway so that we get those state funds to repair the potholes and make the new stoplights and all that stuff in there. But it is a very important. I'm for the outer bypass too, because you don't need two inner bypasses side by side, because the other inner bypass will quickly get flooded with traffic, and then you'll have to look to an outer bypass eventually anyway. So, moving along, property tax relief for seniors. Now, there are a lot of seniors out there, Fred, and some of them watch the program in the afternoon because they are retired. And Wayne also, not only Fred, but Wayne. And are senior citizens being taxed out of their homes?
Well, yes, they are, and we have to be very careful to keep the costs down. I'm a teacher, and I'm very much in favor of our teachers. They seem to be right now making a fairly adequate living. And as I mentioned this morning, I was never in favor of the caps that was passed by the legislator on teacher salaries, which goes a long way to increasing the cost of property taxes, the lack of caps and so forth. But what I recommended this summer is that we have an upper limit, which is the cost of living index, and then they should negotiate increases with their school board within the framework. But I don't like the idea of caps and never have. So I support the teachers in that. On the other hand, I think if we keep it somewhere below the cost of living, then everyone would be able to handle the property tax situation. Now, I'm very excited about our new RAPS program, I think, which is one of the very best ideas for developing property tax relief. And we're going to be releasing information about this over the next several weeks.
Okay, we've got a call coming in, and I guess we'll take that now. I had a thought I wanted to ask you about, but take this call. You don't mind taking any live calls, do you? You probably
No,
get a
that's
few
fine.
questioners during the campaign anyway, so you might as well.
Undoubtedly.
might as well
No,
get
we're
used-
happy to hear from the citizens. You bet. That's what representatives are for.
Go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, I'm glad Mr. Lothberg is running again. Does he know if he's going to have any opponents? We heard through the grapevine that there might be somebody from one of the radio stations that are going to run against him, but they don't even live in the area yet. Is there anything to that?
They don't live in the area. Is that right?
Right.
Well, would that be a Republican or a Democrat or what?
I hear it's supposed to be a Republican that they're going to put up to run against you, but he doesn't live in your area yet, but he's going to move up there.
Well, I would be entirely opposed to. I mean, this is a democracy. Anybody can run in a primary, Democrat or Republican. Bring them on. That's fine. That's the American way, and we'll have a good, clean fight. But I don't want anybody being brought in here from other parts of the state, like my Democratic opponent. All the Republicans in Madison and the party were outraged by that. And I think if someone comes in, it'd be very hypocritical. I mean, it would upset all Republicans if somebody came in from a different district, and I would be opposed to that. That's not the American way. That's not the tradition. This is the same thing we fought so hard about in the last campaign. It's not democratic. It's not fair. People are entitled to representation from people from their own district, and I would be just very upset if I heard somebody from some other district was coming in here to run, especially a Republican.
I hear you, and I think you're right on. I think they call that carpetbagging. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. I don't think we should have it.
Right? What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Good work.
Thanks a lot, caller. Do you have another question? Okay. Well, Wayne, I understand that you want to have a rapprochement, I think that's how you pronounce it, with the teachers' unions and the trial lawyers. Now, sometimes Madison fights spill over into these districts. And good candidates get swallowed up in fights that have nothing to do with them, but they get pulled into fights where they don't agree with what's going on. But, things happen, especially after primaries in Republican and Democratic races. The big boys and the big girls from Madison move in, or on the national level, it's the same way. The big boys move in, and all of a sudden the candidates run in a different direction. People scratch their head and want to know why. So, can you tell the viewers if you hate teachers or you hate trial lawyers, what's going on in those areas? Did you have a personal animosity in those groups?
No, not at all. I think that was, got a little out of hand, the discussion with the union. Okay, but WEAC aside, I'm very fond of teachers. I'm a teacher myself, and I want them to have like we all, a decent wage, so that we have good people teaching our children. Well, what can possibly be wrong with that? And I think they are paid pretty well now, considering the number of months a year they work, right? And then they have these caps, so we don't have to. I don't like the caps, but at least there is some upper limit. I would like to have a negotiated cost of living index level that they would compete on instead of the caps. But I'm all for the teachers. I like teachers, and they do a wonderful job. In terms of the trial lawyers, let's move on to another subject. I have no idea. They dumped in about $20,000 with my opponent. I think it was about $18,000, which is that's a lot of money, and there's a lot of trial lawyers. So I'm not taking on the trial lawyers as such, but I do think that in fairness to our doctors and our medical association, that we do need tort reform in terms of these kind of cases. There should be a limit, particularly to punitive damages that we allow, so that our doctors can continue to function as they have very well. If they do something wrong, we have the legal option, but there should be a limit on it, so they're not forced to leave some of the fields, and the cost of insurance for them is excessively high. We need to work together with our doctors and the wonderful healing arts. So I'm all for doctors, And I have nothing against trial lawyers. They have a job to do.
Okay, how about just unions in general? I know you're a political scientist. I'm sure you took history classes. You know that the union movement went through a very vicious struggle to establish minimum wage and basic working hours, you know, and a lot of people lost their lives. A lot of people got their heads busted. It was pretty much a civil war there for a few years between unions, the police, and the management, and it seems to have all leveled off and cooled off now, this whole all this friction. So are you an anti-union man?
No, absolutely not. I like unions. Unions have done a wonderful job for this country. When you go back, when you have the child labor laws and the sweatshops and so forth, if we didn't have the unions, well, we might be working under those same conditions today. So I think unions have made a great contribution. You know what's interesting? We have to be quite honest and frank about this. The unions were very patriotic and very pro-American. You know, there was a time during the Depression there was some concern about the Red Scare and the Communist Scare and so forth. You know, the unions stood up for America. A lot of times they wouldn't even unload ships that came from communist countries. Very patriotic, the unions, and have done a lot. And a lot of union members fought and died for this country. And so I have nothing against unions. It's very important that they be managed honestly. You know, some of them got the mafia in there, and of course that's wrong. And it's betraying the poor working man and woman that are down in the shop when these kind of crumbs get a hold of the unions. But by and large, the unions have been good. And I think the unions in Eau Claire are, you know, fairly moderate and try to work with management. Let's not divide the world up into management labor. Let's work together in unity. You know, why should we divide the world black and white, men and women, and we're always dividing? Let's pull things together. I'm a great believer in unity. We have a great country. Let's work together. Let's find ways to work together.
Okay, I didn't want you to get on a soapbox, but I agree with that too. But Fred, I know it looks like you were waiting eagerly there to ask another question, so I'll let you jump in there if you want.
You know, one of the first parades during the beginning of the Vietnam War that was in New York City down Fifth Avenue, I marched in that, and there were a lot of Union men in that parade. The hard hats, they were out leading the parade. And I have a great deal of respect for the patriotism of those men. Absolutely. I was glad to join with the other veterans organizations and march behind them.
Okay, Wayne, you know, your district is kind of unique. Well, I guess maybe a lot of districts are like this, but you go from an inner city, almost, I drove through parts of the inner city last night, and it's starting to look pretty tacky in parts of Eau Claire. You go from an inner city type atmosphere of Eau Claire with the minority population, and to a very rural European style of farming communities and farmers. I mean, you go from one extreme to the other in your district, in the 68th district. How are you going to pull all that together and meet the needs of all the different various groups?
Well, a lot of the problems are solved by use of jobs, good-paying jobs. You got to get some money into the community. You know, once you get some good jobs in there, then there's a secondary and tertiary impact of that. You know, then we have the stores and the barber shops and the cosmetologists, you know, and the mom and pop stores that develop, and everybody makes some money. Let's keep that money in the district and keep it moving around, okay, in the district. And that's why I am really, really going to hit hard on jobs and looking for jobs. And, you know, none of this just rhetoric and just talking about it. We have developed a plan for attracting new industry, building on the industry that we have, working with them to, you know, what can we do to keep the industry we have here? What can we do to increase the industry? What can we do to bring in like industry? You know, I think I mentioned this before. I'm not saying that there's a lot of companies that are tire companies that are interested in coming in here, but if there were, you see, a lot of communities wouldn't want a tire company. They think, well, that's some, you know, that's smelly kind of thing. You wouldn't want that in the community. But it's not, and we've had it here successfully, and we'd be very happy to have another tire company. I mean, I'm just saying similar industries attract each other, and we need to work on that. We need to work with we need to jack up the people in Chippewa and Eau Claire who are working to look for jobs. I don't mean to criticize or anything, because I want to work with these people, but we need a unified effort. And the people in Menominee are doing a good job. We're going to look at some other parts of the states that are very successful. I think we need these enterprise zones for some of the areas that are very economically depressed. Okay.
What about prisons? There's talk of there's several groups, I guess, that have formed throughout the 68th district, and I think one of them's in Stanley, another one is in Chippewa Falls. I'm surprised one hasn't formed it right in Eau Claire. You know, there are some sites available for it.
We could build one on the south side.
Got lots of room down there.
But
for a
anyway,
prison.
one of your planks, I'm looking at it right now, is gun-toting criminals. You got to have a place to house them. And not only house them, but when you're talking prisons, what about rehabilitation?
Well, first of all, in terms of the housing, my understanding is that the governor in the state of Wisconsin is looking for another prison site, perhaps up in northwestern Wisconsin. We have a number of communities up here that expressed an interest on the western part of our 68th district. Stanley and I think Chippewa Falls has. And there's some good paying jobs available there, and these places seem to be very secure. And if those communities are interested in having the state prison located there, we might conduct one of those good old American referendums to ask them if they want one. Then let's go to bat and get them. And it's about time the 68th got some of these things. And I'm going to be in there fighting for our share of those state dollars. Why should all the money go to Madison? I'm tired of all the money going to Madison. Okay?
And from Madison to Washington. I saw statistics that show that we get less back than we send out to Washington, but the same thing happens. We send money to Madison from this area. You're saying you want to get some of that money back up here.
Well, it's our money. Why not?
Why not just quit sending it to Madison? Just keep it here.
Even better.
Okay, I think I had one more question. And this is, you have a lot of farmers in your district. It's rural, a fairly good hunk of it is rural. Farmers have cows, and this is a cow-friendly program. It's called the Cow Report. And we're trying to protect those cows against chemicals like antibiotics and BGH. And I'm sure you've gotten your earful about BGH. What are you hearing from the farmers in the 68th district on that issue?
Well, when I've gone around to the farms, you get up about 4 o'clock and get out there 5:30, 6 o'clock out in the barns. And sometimes the farmers are a little cranky in the morning, but they make it very clear that I haven't seen any farmers that I've talked to, and I've talked to many, many. I must have talked to most of the dairy farmers in the 68th district, and I haven't heard of one that is anxious to have BGH, okay, and used with their cows. So I support milk labeling BGH with the BGH label. And I think that will go a long way to resolving the problem, because eventually I suspect that most people will insist on BGH-free milk, and the milk with the BGH in it probably won't sell.
I understand that BGH causes what they call mastitis, which is an inflammation in the udders of the cow. So what develops is a pussy-type mucus, and that gets into the milk. So to remedy that situation, they have to pump the cow full of antibiotics to make it feel better, or her, and then to get the milk back online. But then the antibiotics ends up in the meat and in the milk. So how are we going to? I guess maybe you're not a scientist and know how to do this, but I agree with you as far as this integrity of the product. We need to have labeling and then let the consumer decide whether they want to buy BGH milk or BGH food, meat, and because it gets into everything. Milk is used in so many things. You think about it: milk, butter, cheese, and then the meat itself. The only thing you don't eat is the hide, but you wear that. But I don't know how that would affect you. But anyway, that is a controversial issue, and I'm sure you're going to.
I just want to clarify that mastitis, the cause of mastitis is multiple. Sometimes it's the type of feeding. If the food is too rich, sometimes it's just a function of virus and how little you feed the cow. So there's a variety of reasons that would cause mastitis. That's quite an old problem. And but then then there's the question of what are we going to do with the meat after the after the cow is slaughtered, and that's another hole. Are we going to have BGH listings on meat products, which we probably will need to have?
Okay, Fred, if you got another question there.
No, I don't have another question.
Well, I think we'll take a call then on line 1. See what the caller has to say. Go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
Hi there. This question is directed towards Mr. Laufenberg. I just tuned in and I heard you speaking a little bit about the initiative referendum, which of course is a great idea. What's the likelihood that there would be the support in the legislature?
Well, it's a new idea for the legislature. I mean, it's used in various other states around the country.
Some states do have it, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and we have it for our cities. So we do have that experience. So it would have to be a gradual process of education and going around talking to groups around the state.
Have you gotten any other input from legislatures as to whether that likely would occur, that we could have that in the state of Wisconsin?
No, that's part of our new vision.
Okay. And then would you comment on and tell us your position on this bypass?
I think I've already answered that. Well,
I think I might have missed it. Maybe you could tell us once more what your position is on that.
And again. Okay. As you know, that I've been pushing very hard for the referendum to let the people decide, because it's a very controversial issue. It's been fully studied by the Department of Transportation. The information is there to the people. All we need is a good, fair debate and let the people decide on that. The new information has come to me that it looks like the proponents of the outer are very effective. It looks like the surveys that we have taken suggest that there's support for the outer, greater support for the outer. There's more government agencies that have supported the outer. So although I would prefer a referendum, and will continue to support that to let the people decide, other than that, I guess I would support the outer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, caller. Do you have another question? Oh, I guess not, Fred. Okay, Fred, did you have a question there?
I agree with the outer. And I make it clear that I don't have any property out there either.
Now, I noticed in today's paper it says there was only 171 votes out of 8,000. But that was such a quickly run campaign. Well,
That's how many we were short. We got a lot more votes than that.
But the primary was just a few weeks, and then the general was a couple more weeks, and that was it. It was a whirlwind tour there, wasn't it? You'll have a little more chance of getting to know the constituents more this time around, won't you?
Well, that's true, and you will have an opportunity. It's simply 6.5 months is quite a bit longer period of time. You'll have a chance to make course corrections in the campaign. You'll have more time to generate financial support. As I indicated, that the amount of money that they obtained from certain special interest groups in Madison, my opponent, was just incredible. They rounded up $60-some thousand in just a couple of months. That's that buys an awful lot of media and has a big impact on the last-minute independent voter. That's really what they're talking about, because this district is quite close, and it takes a real strong effort. In the past, it's been thought as basically a Democratic district, so it takes a lot of intelligence and a lot of good issues and a lot of hard work for someone other than a Democrat to get elected.
Well, I'm sure you'll be able to really get out there and work. You got 6.5 months to do it, and I think you need to go to another appointment. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the camera to Fred, and he's got a little something there he wants to read. And while we're on Fred, well, that'll allow you to leave the studio. But we appreciate you coming in your hectic schedule and to let the viewers know that you are running and that you're going to run an aggressive and competent race. And what was your final statement this morning?
Well, we said, let the people decide, and then on to victory in November.
Okay, that's a good slogan. Well, thanks for coming, and now we're going to switch to Fred.
All right, thank you for inviting me.
I have here an article which is written by Major General Henry Moore, The cumulative brain power in Congress and the executive branch should, long before now, have realized the necessity of scrapping or modifying the expensive U.S. habit of yo-yo defense buildup and let down between political and military crisis in this century. Unfortunately, it hasn't. Drastically shrinking the size, shape, composition, and strength of the U.S. armed forces on budget-driven reason after each crisis costs too much money and too many thousands of young American lives in conflicts these policies invite. In addition, the accompanying drawdown of military forces, defense industries, and base closings invariably lead the United States into the next war while creating painful and unavoidable economic recessions. And
So-
I think that's quite true.
So what do you glean from that article there, Fred?
Well,
What's it mean?
we must have armed forces that are going to be able to defend us. Now, for example, we had something happen that recently, the Duma in Russia let those who revolted against Yeltsin, they gave them amnesty. And those hardline communists now are out in Russia working, and hopefully they think to topple Yeltsin. So
Wow.
we'll be back to the Cold War again if that happens.
Well, I know some congressmen and senators are calling for starting to re-beef up the military in this country because, PX Kelly was in town a few months ago, and he says if we had to do another Desert Storm, we couldn't get the job done.
Right. And mind you, it took us 6 months to get the troops over there and the equipment to do the job. Who will wait for us to do that?
Well, you know,
An idiot only.
You know, Fred, that there's a submarine station right off each coast that could launch a nuclear missile, and it would hit New York in a matter of 5 or 10 minutes. So we can't afford 6 months. We got to have rapid deployment
I know.
just to take care of our own country, let alone halfway around the world, Fred. But our allies are shrinking in that area, Fred. Fewer and fewer countries want to allow our troops in and bases, and you know, we just got pretty much booted out of the Philippines, and
Well-
Japan would like to have us remove any nuclear weapons that we have over there. So it's a two-way street. We might be picking on North Korea, but they have a right to pick on us in some parts of the world too, or we're threatening their interests. And you know, so it works both ways. And there's a lot of stuff goes on in the background we don't know about. But hopefully, Fred, those thousands and thousands of nuclear warheads that are aimed at us, hopefully somebody from America is observing those, so that when they are being destroyed, they actually are being destroyed and not recycled into new weapons.
Well, this is another thing that they have to watch out is because it is possible that they're replacing with new missiles. Now, the Soviet Union a year ago increased their spending on military equipment 10%. They've done the same thing again this year. So what are they building it for? If you want peace and all that, you don't have to go out and build the things of war.
Why are they? I'll tell you why they're continuing to build, because the United States continues to send billions of dollars on the other end.
Yeah, probably using some of our money to do it.
If I put $1 billion in one pocket, that allows you to take $1 billion out of the other and spend it for more weapons. 'Cause,
True.
You know, net it equals out. So why should we keep propping up their war machine?
Well, very foolishly, we have some people in here who want to get in the same bed with Soviet Russia.
Well, I
And
think
they're
it's a matter
highly placed individuals in our government and in industry.
Well, Fred, going back to this date in history, April 18th, 1906, what do you think happened out in San Francisco?
An earthquake.
It was a big one up to that time, and virtually the entire city was destroyed, and it was estimated to be near 9.0 on the Richter scale. Can you imagine if something like that hit New York City or Los Angeles now? 9.0? Look how much damage in that San Francisco one. That was around, what, 6 or something?
Yes.
But the magnitude really increases and doubles when you get up in those bigger numbers, so was a major devastation, even for 1906.
That would knock a lot of buildings down in New York.
Yeah. A lot of the
Because a
old-
number of them are, the older ones especially. Although there was a time when we built houses, they built pretty good houses years ago. We're making all kinds of shortcuts now, as far as building is concerned. We don't use plaster and the things that we did once in buildings. We're using plasterboard or sheetrock.
Well, Fred, I know you just had the unfortunate task of going to a funeral today and a wake yesterday, and well, on this date, back in 1865, an American president was laying in a funeral home. So the whole nation was mourning. Of course, back in those days, it took a while to get the word out. And his funeral services were held tomorrow in 1865, April 19th. So that was another little piece of history. But the first Republican, Fred, the first Republican president was also the first president assassinated in office that I'm aware of. But that was a terrible tragedy, Fred. And of course, that was the culmination of the Civil War. What a way to end the war.
Right.
But you know, on the Confederate side, Fred, right around that period, they were hanging Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederation. So both presidents ended up losing out of the deal with their lives. Well, I think we're about running out of time, Fred. So if you got one more little shorty there, about a minute long, then we're going to have to sign off.
I see. Continuing its devastating series on Watergate, the Washington Times reported that the Rose Law Firm, which once employed Hillary Clinton and the late Vincent Foster as senior partners, have been shredding documents relating to the Whitewater development, the object of a probe by the Justice Department Special Counsel. And in addition, something else, shorty, China's lack of civil rights. The State Department's annual report on human rights indicates that Beijing's record on this area, quote, fall far short of international norms. Incidents of torture, forced confessions, repression of dissent, and holding of political prisoners were cited among Red China's human rights record.
Well, that's amazing, Fred. But you know, they're starting to set up slave labor in this country too. It's called the prison system. We have the largest prison system in the world now, and they are setting up slave labor within those camps and prisons for as little as 10 cents an hour. So we're going to have to quit pointing the finger at China because we're doing the same thing in this country. But we're running out of time, so I'm not going to let you argue with me about it. Unless
I'm
you
not going to argue with it at all. I agree with it. I heard a man on TV the other night who is...
We're done, Fred. Now, we just wanted to say thanks to Chris and Cliff Economaki, the Siamese twins of engineering, for their help again, and all the other staff down here at Public Access Channel 11, and hopefully we'll continue to come to you live, and we'll be on next Monday night at 9 p.m. So we'll see you again next week.
Did you get a chance to mention the net?